Welcome to AOE Live, episode number 9. We're recording this show live on Tuesday, June 23rd. We will be joined tonight by Ian Sands, who will talk to us about his vision for the future of art education. I am Tim Bogatz, a high school teacher from Omaha, Nebraska.
And I'm Andrew McCormick, and I'm a middle school art teacher from Cedar Falls, Iowa. And tonight we're going to be joined by a good friend and mentor to all of us, a big fan. I'm a fan of his, Ian, an inventive, imaginative, creative teacher from Apex High School in North Carolina. He really has, over the last couple of years, become a leading voice in choice-based art education and TAB. He's here to talk to us tonight about transition to choice-based education, his love for spray paint and zonkies, and answer one of the biggest questions out there, what should the future of art ed look like? So, Ian, we're really happy to have you.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it, and it's a great introduction.
Well, we have to flatter our guests, right?
Yeah, we got to butter you up before we hit you with the hard questions.
We also want to say hello to our listeners and those of you that are watching live right now. If you're on Crowdcast, send questions our way. Ian wants to hear from you, and he wants to answer what you guys want to know.
Sure.
Yep, so, and
Absolutely.
like always, you guys know we've been using Crowdcast for a while. You can always upvote people's questions so we can kind of hear from them, highlight those questions you want to hear about, and it's just a great way to participate, and you can also follow along on Twitter as well.
And as always, once we're done tonight, podcast is available on the AOE Live page. It'll go up later this week on iTunes and Stitcher. Listen to it on your drive to school, at home in the evening, or even during your plan time. And since it's summer, you can listen to it whenever. Like, get with it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump right in. And we're talking the future of art ed and all those important things, but we're going to start with something maybe even more important, which are zonkies. Okay, so Ian, I need to ask, okay, just so everybody has a good idea here. Okay, what is the zonkie, and where did your fascination with zonkies come from? How did that first get started?
So let me tell you, hopefully my wife's not listening to this story, but I've always made critters and was interested in making little animals and stuff like that, and writing children's books also. And one day my wife and I were taking a vacation, and we were going down through South Carolina, kind of a rural area, and we were going past a farm, and I looked out the window and I saw a donkey, in the farm, and my wife is driving the car, and she had looked over and she says, "Oh my gosh, did you see that? It was a zebra." I was like, "No, I think it was a donkey." And she's like, "No, I saw a zebra." And maybe she did, I don't know. But I was like, oh, just making fun of her, kind of picking on her. I was like, "No, maybe you saw a zonkie," just like being a wise ass. And then, I was like, wait a minute, a zonkie, that's kind of a cool word, And then I went home and I looked it up, and there actually is a zonkie, which is a male zebra and a female donkey. And if they have a hybrid baby, whatever you want to call it, It's actually a zonkie. So I was just like, I'm going to run with that. So I added it to my repertoire of critters I was drawing, and eventually it kind of became the main critter. And that's where it came from.
Wait, I'm going to ask a question that's going to show how stupid I am here, and I'm not afraid to do that on live radio. So I understand putting two words together, but there is actually a monstrosity known as the zonkie that is real. This is really happening.
That's legit.
Yeah, I actually started looking into hybrids, and I actually put together a book about them, just self-published. But when you take the male of the species of an animal that can breed with another animal, you create a hybrid. So if it's the male zebra and a female donkey, you get a zonkie. But if it's a male donkey and a female zebra, you get a Deborah or a Debra. So ligers, tigons, wolfins, beefalo, they're all real animals. But they can't reproduce. They can only be made that way, one way.
We're gonna call out the podcast right here, right now, because my mind is I didn't know this. We just change up the whole thing to just be like animal mating 101, and just that'll be great.
Biology class. Here we go.
All right. Well, hey, let's dig into something maybe a little less important than zonkies, which is your transition to choice-based art education. I did that a couple years ago, and you were kind of an inspiration to me. I saw you were doing it at the high school level. So can you talk a little bit about that transition? What was the reason, the impetus behind that move for you?
Sure. I think I actually was doing it all along. And I think I felt guilty about it in a little ways. There were projects I was doing, and I would go to my R1 students, and I would give them these choices of media, as sort of these fun projects, kind of on the side, and then the real serious projects were the teacher-led projects where I was supposed to have them do still lifes or something or whatever. And I just really enjoyed doing the fun projects, quote unquote. And then I went to, I think it was probably NEA conference in Seattle. I think it was the Seattle one I went to, and I saw a series of people, including Catherine Douglas, Nan Hathaway, but also Olivia Gooley, if I ever say her name correctly, the last name. And I kind of took all this information home, and I was like, wow, all these people are saying these things that, like, I'm doing, but, like, they're legitimizing it. And so I kind of went home and I kind of put together a program, and I thought it was something original, and then as I started looking into it, I was realizing, well, I'm actually just doing what you guys call choice-based. And I was like, well, I'm going to continue working on that and moving forward towards that, because now that I realize it's something I can actually do without getting yelled at. It's the real deal.
And just for people who are kind of new to your class and your high school at North Carolina, how long have you been doing choice-based art ed? I mean, how many years has it been?
Well, I started Apex. This was my 9th. I'm going into my 10th year. So I probably was doing little projects all along. The last 3 years, I mean, it's been, well, since Seattle, it's probably the 4th year going into it, where I've been, purposely doing it, moving forward with a plan on how to roll it out in the classroom.
That's funny. We have kind of similar experiences. I noticed early on I was also giving my kids, kind of like, oh, you're done early. Here's kind of a fun, open-ended project. And I enjoyed those more. The kids enjoyed those more. I was like, man, I must be doing something wrong if, like, my bonus assignments are, like, kind of way better than my original ones. And that was one of the reasons I kind of moved over. So kind of in that same vein, what do you think are some of the like, big benefits for you as a teacher going TAB or CBAE, all these acronyms, and then what do you think is the biggest benefit to the students going more choice?
With the students, I guess it's just a different mindset, and it's one thing we have to kind of break out of, because I think like originally you get out of school and you're like, how am I going to teach? And the only way you know how to teach is how you were taught. So I thought about it like myself. I was like, I'm doing projects that, like, my high school teachers taught with me. So, they might have been 30 years old, and 40 years old when they were teaching me the lessons, and now I'm 30 years old, 40 years old, and I'm teaching lessons that are 80 years old. And it's like we don't break the mold. And I think to some degree, it comes back around, and I was like, well, why am I doing these projects that other people have done? Is it because they're the best thing to do? Or, for the student, or is it just because of the way I've always done things, the way things have always been done? And so that was kind of an epiphany for me to start with as well. I think with the students, it just became, a lot of times it was like I was doing these projects that I thought were, the right thing to do, or as I was taught to do, but the students weren't really getting anything out of them. The projects weren't really great projects. They were maybe doing objectives I wanted them to do, but it wasn't because they wanted to do them. It was because I was kind of almost forcing it on them. So I think when I was able to open it up to more choice-based teaching, I was able to reach into more what they wanted to do, things they were excited about. I mean, I followed my passion. Why do I not want my students to follow their passions too? They do a better job when they're following their passions. They're more engaged when they're following their passions. And I think that had a lot to do. I mean, I saw these things little. It wasn't like a big flashing light. It was like little by little I've been seeing these things.
And
that's where it's going with that.
Kind of talking about those little steps, we got a couple questions on Crowdcast just about the best way to transition into a choice-based curriculum, like for the high school, or even if you don't want to do a full transition into choice, if you just want to kind of dip your toes in the water, like what kind of advice would you give people if they're just kind of wanting to explore the idea of choice-based education a little bit more?
Right, and I think my first thought on that is that I've kind of gotten away from the verbiage of choice-based.
Right.
Because I think when someone says choice-based, they think I'm giving students choices in material or I'm letting them decide things, and that's not really the case. It's what I'm trying to do with TAB. It's actually teaching for artistic behaviors, and I think that's more what I'm trying to do. And I think there's a mistake that people think, well, TAB is full choice. And that's not what TAB stands for. It doesn't stand for full choice. It stands for teaching for artistic behaviors. So a lot of what I'm trying to do is think, what is an artistic behavior I want my students to be able to do, to learn, to take, to go through that process. So and I think when you view it like that, you can start small. I mean, I started with a lot of people do themes and theme projects, and we did a lot of things like that. Like I would say, I've got a theme, a topic that I want you to be able to kind of to work out how would you respond to this, how would you answer this question, this theme, and then I'll leave the materials up to you, or limited materials, like maybe this is a color project, so I'm going to give you a couple of choices in media. That's a good way to do it if you're just kind of breaking into it, I found anyway. But once students know how to use the materials, that doesn't become a problem anymore. You can really open it up. So it becomes more about the teaching of a artistic behavior, like artists observe. So we're going to do a project about observation, or artists solve problems. We're going to do a project about solving problems, and the media becomes less important.
I like that tip about starting with themes. I know that's definitely where I started, and still kind of where I'm at. I know that this question will come up sometimes. You know, for everything that we do well or adopt, we kind of leave something behind. So, you know, we talk about the pros of teaching for artistic behavior. Do you feel like you had to leave anything behind, or jettison something that you kind of miss from time to time?
Yeah, you know, but it's selfishness. I had projects. I was kind of known for doing these kind of big, crazy projects, and I would go out on the internet and I would see how someone did something crazy and cool, and I would go do a big, crazy, cool project, and people were like, oh, he did a cool, crazy project. But really what it wasn't my students doing the cool project. It was me. Yeah. Like I had my minions doing my project for me. And so you leave that behind. You know, it's like, and I think a lot of art teachers can relate to that. It's like, oh, I've got this project I really like to do. Why? Because you get great results from your students, or because your students are getting great results. There's a difference. And I think you have to leave that ego at the door and say, okay, this is not about me anymore, about my projects, but it's about what the students want, and what are their passions, and what are they good at, where do they need to improve, and taking it from there.
That distinction between, you know, do your students get great results, or do you get great results from your students? That's blown my mind right now. And I think that all teachers, if we're really honest with ourselves, I mean, I know I fall into the trap of like, this is a winner because look at what I got them to produce, you know, and that's a really great, that's a great distinction. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the Apex High portal and kind of how that came about, and kind of how you use that.
Sure. Right. Well, the portal was kind of a brainchild of the three of the art teachers that were working there, and we were kind of sitting around. You know, people have art websites. You know, that's not uncommon to have an art website for your teacher, and you put up your lesson plans or whatever. But I was like, what if we could? And I stole a little bit from when I used to work in corporate. I worked for Nortel for a while, and we had a portal in the company I worked with, and it was a place that all the employees could go to get the information they needed. Sort of knowledge management. And so that kind of concept came up as, what if we had a website where all the students could go to get the knowledge they needed? So it wasn't really about, you know, like I've got all the knowledge in my head, and if I get hit by a bus on the way to school on Monday, you guys are all out of luck. You can have a sub until they can find a new art teacher. It's like the portal is there, and all the information that I can provide is now there online, and you can grab it. So we came up with three areas we wanted to hit, which was the sort of how do I, where we made a few demo videos about how to do certain techniques and stuff, and we're still building that. There was what do I think, which was the reflection piece. It's like, if I'm going to go write about my artwork, how do I reflect on it? How do I self-assess? Those type of things. And the first one was originally inspiration. What do I want to create? And that kind of morphed from originally just being sort of links to Pinterest about different projects they might be interested in, or different medias they might be interested in, to actually putting up those artistic behavior kind of almost self-guided. You could go through these projects yourself and come up with projects on your own by looking at the information that's there.
Okay, and then kind of with the portal and your kids going there for, you know, demos and research and things like that, have you found that sort of changes the way that you interact with your kids?
It's another vehicle, I will say. It's not one. It's not like the only method. So some students really like it, and they're like, I'm like, what are you working on? It's like, well, I went to the portal and I saw this unit and I'm working on it. And other kids are like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, did you look at the portal? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay. So, but it's another, tool. It's really a tool. And if they choose to use it, that's great. I don't force it on anybody, but some kids really, buy into it and some kids don't. And I think that's fine.
Yeah, and then kind of related to the portal as well, I know you have a lot of your themes on there too, and a few of the people who are listening right now are asking about, what kind of themes do you do? Can you give some specific examples of what you like to do with your themes or what you have done in the past?
Themes are tough. I think one of the things is that people want to come up with themes. And it almost, unless you're starting from the beginning where students really need to have a theme given to them, it almost becomes back to that student. It almost goes backwards to that student-led, teacher-led model. Excuse me.
Right.
I actually want to get to the point where students are developing their own themes.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate goal. So a student can come in and be like, I've got this idea. I want to answer this essential question about this topic. So what's a theme? Whimsical is one we talked about towards the end of the year. What makes something whimsical? Why is something funny or not funny when you look at it? What makes something cute? And the opposite of that, and this has been done before, creepy. So something's cute, what makes something creepy? And by answering those essential questions, the artist starts to think about those topics. Some themes that, a lot of that have been done before. Identity is a really popular one. We did place, which was interesting because you can say what's happening in your place, not just where do you live, but what's happening in the place that you live. Right. So that people can identify with that. Trying to think of the other one. Story, metaphor. We've done metaphor. Those are all good ones off the top of my head.
Cool. Thank you. And then you kind of talked a little bit about collaborating with some of the other teachers you work with as far as putting together the portal and all the things that you do with that. And I know Melissa Purty, who works with you, is also becoming a pretty strong voice with her blog and everything that she's doing. Can you talk a little bit about working with her? And then also, I know you guys are doing a presentation together at the AOE Summer Conference. So if you don't mind, a little sneak preview of what might be coming with that.
Sure. Melissa is Melissa's actually intelligent. So
she is
that's part of the difference right there.
Okay, I love reading her stuff.
She is really, and she's book smart, and she has a sassy attitude, but she's young, so she does things right. I really enjoy working with her. We work really well together in the sense that she can get nitty-gritty in the details really quick. Right. And I'm kind of more big picture guy. Let's do this big thing here like that. And she's like, how are we going to do it? I'm like, I don't know. It's just going to be this big thing. And she comes in and she's like, okay, Sans, here's how we're going to do it. And she comes in with the details. And it's funny because sometimes she comes in too fast, and I got to be like, wait, we haven't laid out the big picture yet. Yeah. Sometimes she's like, it's time to get the details. So we work really well together like that. She's had experience with Tab in elementary school, which is why one of the reasons I wanted her at Apex. Yeah. We were hiring, and she had I found her website for her classroom online, and it talked about ChoiceBased, and one of the stories just blew me away, which is one of the stories she relates to. Many times she's mentioned it, so I won't repeat it here, but when I saw it, I was just like, this is the person I want, and I emailed her, and I think when she got the email, she was like, who's this crazy person? Like, she knew who I was. She's like, who's this crazy person sending me this email, asking all about these things? But then she was like, I think I want to do it. So she brought that elementary experience with her as well. And again, I think she brings a lot of things that, like she understands the standards. Like she'll go read them, she'll understand them. She really understands, like I said, the detail stuff that makes her look, and she plugs it in, and it's been great. As far as the presentation we're going to do is exactly that. How do you take two art teachers or more and have them work together? We shared a room. How do you share a room and work with an art teacher without driving each other absolutely crazy? And and we have, but we went through kind of a process of this kind of the storming at first, and then we kind of normaled things out, and then we started performing, and that's sort of what the presentation is about. How do you get from crazy to actually being able to work together and put together things like a portal or different units and things.
All right, cool.
So I wanted to ask you a quick question. You mentioned that Melissa is really good at kind of standards and how everything ties together. Have you guys kind of tweaked your portal at all to reflect some of the language of the NCCAS? Because when you talk about it, I feel like there's really strong parallels. And if you would need to kind of readjust some things, it would just be some tweaking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When we first put together the units, that you kind of see the units on there now, but there's a lot of behind the scene kind of lesson plans that we did together. She went in and she plugged in all the standards into. No one ever sees it, right? But it's all there in the documents. We have Google Docs. We have an Art of Ed Google Docs, and we went in and you can see exactly why we're saying we're teaching art to solve problems and it meets these standards, blah blah blah, here and here and here. And she was instrumental in doing all of that, which was great.
That's awesome.
So for those people out there who maybe have a very different situation than you and Melissa have, a couple teachers that work together that maybe don't philosophically see eye to eye, did you have that early on when you started adopting more teaching for artistic behavior, or was it always smooth sailing? And if it wasn't smooth sailing, were there some ways that you got around that or through that?
No, it's still not smooth sailing. There are actually 4 teachers at Apex, and only 3 of us are choice-based teachers. So, the first teachers I worked with before Melissa, and Kimberly Sudkamp is one of the teachers that works there too, ceramics teacher. But before those 2 came on, the other teachers were very kind of old school by the book. They were great. They taught me a lot of things, but they were not, they would have not have ever jumped on the bandwagon with any of this. And so I was sort of that crazy art teacher who worked out, in the trailer.
You're still the crazy art teacher that works out in the trailer.
Yeah, I think so. But how do you do it with someone who doesn't? It's hard in one sense because the beauty of working alone or working with teachers that do the same thing is you can scaffold. So let's say Melissa teaches an Art 1 class. I know what she's going to teach them, so when her kids come to me for Art 2 or Art 3 for that matter, they understand what's going on. It's much more difficult if you have a teacher-led Art 1 and all of a sudden they come to Art 2 and you're like, hey, we're going to do sort of this tab thing, and they're like, what is going on? I don't know. I don't understand. I've always been spoon-fed. You better start spoon-feeding me now, or I'm going to, And so you have to, so it's difficult in that regard. But that can happen anywhere. That can happen with a middle school coming to a high school or an elementary going to a middle school. It's just the way it is. So.
Yeah, but
have to be flexible.
Yeah, I was just going to say a big part of the idea of tab teaching is just that idea of flexibility, and so I think the beauty of that is that it can adapt to so many different things. And kind of related to that, we had another question from the crowdcast from Kylie. Suggestions for an art program that puts students of all levels together. Like, how would you deal with that if you have Art 1, Art 2, Art 3 all together? How can you make what you're teaching and what you're doing not only relevant to everybody but beneficial to everybody with all of those different levels?
Yeah, and I'm ready for that. I wish I could actually pull that off right now at Apex. It's what I wrote about today on the Art of Ed. Students come in at different levels, if we like it or not. We can shove them all in an Art 1 class or say they're all going on to Art 2, but it's just not true. Students have different levels of skills. So imagine if you had just a class where there were Art 1 and Art 2 and Art 3 students all in there together, and you had multiple teachers being able to work together. And you could say, hey, guys, we're going to do a demo right now about this is the example I gave on the Art of Ed article. We're going to do a demo on one-point perspective. Well, have you ever done one perspective? No. Come on over. Check this out. Oh, I kind of had it last year, but I'm not too sure. Come on over. It's a refresher. I got this down. I can do 3-point perspective. Okay, go ahead. Go on, with your thing. You don't need to watch this. Like, why am I having to present, and make everybody in the class spend a week on 1-point perspective when a third of the class has it down or 2/3 of the class have it down? It would be much nicer if you could actually give kids what they need when they need it. That's kind of my motto there with that.
Very cool. And so, as you just mentioned, that was going to be my next question. You're leaving the Art of Ed, unfortunately, but going out with something really big, and I'm really excited to read it, but the 3-part series on the future of art education. And so today was art space and new media. So, you talk a little bit about the demo thing, but also kind of about the physical space, supplies, displays, all that kind of stuff. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of what you're thinking as far as the art space goes?
And it's different in every school, but I'm just going to give you as an example. At Apex, we have 2 trailers for art, and we have 2 rooms that are art rooms with sinks, and they're adjoining, and there's a storage room in between. And I've gone up to the auto mechanics room, and I've looked in there, and what they have is this separate, it's a smaller room with desks all in a row, and they have an LCD projector with a laptop, and whenever the auto mechanic teacher needs to show them something, bookwork, he brings them into that room, and they work in there. And they do their bookwork, but then when he's done, he brings them out to the studio, and there are cars and lifts and jacks and everything that you need to do to change tires and change oils and whatever else they do in there. Why isn't the art room like that? We still have our art rooms set up almost like, my room, a lot of rooms I've seen, almost sometimes desks still in a row because you have to accommodate that bookwork, but at the same time you want to have that studio feel to it. It would be so great if art rooms, architects, listen up, could design rooms where there was a smaller room for bookwork with the computer in it, and then we could go into the studio space, and it could be set up with easels on one side and throwing wheels on the other side, and drafting tables on another side, computers on another side, and so it could be more of a really room that meets the needs of artists as opposed to high school education, which is what it's sort of designed to be right now. As far as materials, I'll drop in on that. I think that we, as art teachers, have gotten really caught up in supplies that you buy from Dick Blick or other art supplies. We buy the Crayons, we buy the crayons, we buy the pastels, we buy the paint. But there's so much art being made now in contemporary art that uses more modern or even different materials, as I mentioned in the article, concrete, bird seed, joint compound, screen, whatever it is. We need to be open to go into Home Depot or Lowe's and picking out half our art supplies, and really stocking the room with materials that people can play with and expand on and come up with really cool projects based on these new materials.
This kind of piggybacks off of the last episode with Cassidy when we kind of talked about STEAM and her magnet school, but there's a big push in education now, which is maker spaces. Maker spaces, everything. Kids are makers and tinkerers, and I love that, and I'm involved in one. But I also think that the art room was the original maker space, and so was FCS and IT. And what you're describing to me really is kind of like a redesigned art room that's almost more like a makerspace art lab. And I've even thought of calling my art room like an art lab or a design lab or a creativity lab, just to kind of push the nomenclature a little bit so that kids know, like, this is where like really big thinking and designing happens, that not that kind of traditional way of thinking. So
I'm there with you.
All right. Hey, and then part 2 of the series is about student learning outcomes. And I know a lot of art teachers are concerned, you might even want to say scared about, SLOs and showing all of this student growth. Can you talk a little bit about, how do we want to say that? I guess what responsibilities we have as an art teacher, as we move into more of this age of constantly being assessed?
Right, and this is where my thinking is going, and you'll probably see some articles from me in other locations about this topic. And it's not so much even the growth, which is almost ridiculous. I mean, the way they did it for us, I can say, is I'm going to talk about what I said in the article, which is my son had to do it for gym, right? So how do you do it in gym? Well, at the beginning of the year, how many push-ups can you do or sit-ups can you do in a minute? Okay, at the end of the year, well, now how many sit-ups can you do in a minute? Yeah. And, he did less. He did less sit-ups. So did my son fail gym? I guess so. I guess he's not a good sit-up doer. But the point is, like, the things he learned at gym were about working together, teamwork, sportsmanship. Those were the things that were important. How many push-ups, sit-ups he can do, that's great, but it's not really the growth that I wanted to see out of the class, and I don't think any PE teacher would disagree with me. So why is it with the art room we do the same thing? What is important that the students learn? What is assessment? And when we have to break it down to, I need to see that you shaded 5 more values in this shading than you did at the beginning of the year, or I need to see that your 1-point perspective is your lines are straighter because you used a ruler later on. That's nice. It's good. It's important skills, but is it really growth? So let's talk about assessment for a minute. What is assessment? We've gotten so far away, and this is taking us further away from what true assessment is. True assessment, when we go into the classroom and we see what our kids are capable of, and we take them, because we are the experts and we have expertise, we take them and introduce them to media, materials, and skills and directions that they've never gone in based on their strengths that we see, and all of a sudden they're producing things that they never thought they could even do. That's true growth. And you're not going to get that in a document or, a multiple choice quiz or however else you want to assess it. So
exactly. Cool. And then the last part of the article, or the third part of the series, talks about, I think, what your biggest passion is students creating authentic art. So what are, in your view, what are teachers lacking in this area, and what needs to change to get our students to be able to create more authentic pieces of work?
I think that from my own personal experience, right, this is what I was doing. So I'm not picking on anybody else. But what I was doing was, when I was first doing projects, I was saying, you need to, I'll give the example of the value again. You need to have so many different values in an image. So we're all going to do projects where you show me how you can use value in this image. And what that is not a project, that's an exercise. And what I did was I turned that exercise into a 2-week project. And then all the projects looked the same, and everyone maybe had, different amounts of values. The values were a little different, so I could give them grades based on that. That's not authentic art. That is them trying to accommodate what I was trying to get them to do in an exercise. I can do an exercise about, shading in like 5 minutes, and then we can go do a project. And if they need to use value in it, I can sit down and I can work with them, and I can explain to them how they need to go darker or they need to be richer in their pictures. Authentic art is when a student has, I'm going to give you an example of one of my students. I had a student named Emma in my class, and she did this great picture, had a lot of meaning in it, and she came around to do another picture, and I said, what are you going to do? And she says, I want to paint a peacock. And I was like, okay, why? And she couldn't answer me. She didn't know why she wanted to paint a peacock. And there's nothing wrong with painting a peacock, but the point is she didn't know why. And so I left her with that, and then she went out and she looked at Pinterest, and she looked at some Zentangles, and she came back and she says, I want to do a Zentangle elephant like I saw on Pinterest. And again, I was like, why? And it was only because she had seen one and she wanted to just emulate it. She wanted to copy it. So I left her with that. And then eventually, she came around and she says, okay, I've got a picture of myself. It was taken of me on a missions trip, so it was very personal and meaningful to her. And she goes, I want to take the picture of me and paint it, and I want to turn the background of the jungle into a Zentangle. And I said, now you're on to something. So that's authentic art. And she spent basically the whole semester on this one piece between the drawing, the sketch, and actually doing the painting. She spent almost the whole semester, basically the whole semester, on this one painting. But I think it was probably the most meaningful piece of art. I don't know what she'll do next year, but she'd ever done up to that point.
Yeah, very cool.
Great story. That's awesome.
Thanks.
All right. Andrew, anything else before we send Ian off to the lightning round?
Oh, man. No, because I could just talk to Ian forever. I mean, I'm trying to write down all these great things, and I definitely think we've kind of said this to some other people before. We got to have a 2-parter. We might have to have Ian back and do some more talk about TAB, because I just think there's so much power there, just so much good stuff. But yeah, we only got so much time, so let's get some lightning round questions and get them out of here.
All right. So 5 quick questions, 5 quick answers. Andrew, you are up.
All right. Yeah, I'll ask you first. I think I might have an idea, but I could be totally wrong. Favorite meal or snack to have in the art room? Given that, your hands are clean and there's no dust on it and we're all kosher and everything.
Oh, have I ever answered that before? I don't really eat them. Anything, scones.
See? I knew it. I knew that's what you were going to say. I knew it.
International Scone Day is the second Friday of October. Everybody put it on their calendar.
All right.
Yep.
Okay, and then for those of you that don't know, Ian is a big hockey fan, as am I. So, Ian, your favorite hockey team and least favorite hockey team?
Okay, I live in North Carolina, so it's the Canes, right? But I grew up in New York. So it was the Islanders. And I said to my brother, when we go see a game, I want to wear an Islanders jersey, but I want to wear a Canes jersey. I was like, what if I did a half and half? And he's like, I'll never sit in a game with you. So I guess my least favorite in response to that has to be the Rangers, because having been an Islanders
if you're an Islanders fan, yeah.
There you go. There you go. So what did you think about the Stanley Cup Final? You okay with the Blackhawks winning, or
I didn't have a dog in the fight, but I was okay with it. There's a couple of teams maybe on the way up that I would have rather seen, but I was okay with them taking out Florida because my sister's in Florida, so there you go.
Yeah. So I'm gonna ask, and that's we haven't asked in a while, but we asked a couple episodes in a row early on. Is if you have a least favorite artist to teach, and maybe I'm guessing that with your tab approach, maybe you kind of ditch like your tried and true blue chip artist because it doesn't relate to kids, but in the past, or maybe even still, there's an artist that you feel kind of obligated to teach, and you don't really dig teaching it so much.
Yeah, and this is actually a good question. It gives me a chance to clear the air, because I think people think I'm for saying this, but I teach art history, and when I get to Picasso, which I'm not a fan of Picasso, I'll teach him, but I actually have a PowerPoint presentation and the 5 bullets of why Picasso was a jerk. So all my art history students know that Picasso was a jerk, and they believe it. And so if you asked any of my students, that I've taught over the years, they'd probably instantly say Picasso.
All right.
Nice. But it's only because I want to have an enemy. It was Steve Jobs said you should always have an enemy, so Picasso became ours. Helps him learn it. Helps him remember it.
All right. Okay. What would you be doing if you were not an art teacher?
I was not an art teacher. I was a GUI interface designer. I was a web designer, project manager, and a manager at Nortel. In between, before I taught middle school, I left, went to Nortel, worked at a couple other companies, and I came back. And the reason I came back is because when I was doing that, although I really enjoyed, making little buttons on my Photoshop that people could click on, I never felt there was a purpose in my life for doing it. I loved doing it, but I felt there was absolutely no purpose. I received two letters, handwritten letters from students this year, that just really brought home like how much they had enjoyed being in my class and how much the class had meant to them, and that's why I do it, because I know it does make a difference in people's lives. It's incredible.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, if you could travel anywhere in the world, where would you go and why?
I don't like to travel because I don't like to fly.
Oh, really? I didn't know that about you.
I'm afraid of flying. Yeah, I hate it. So I'm like really good at just staying home, a homebody. I live 2 hours from the beach, and we got a little shack down there, and so I like to go down there. So I guess any place, if I could go down there and throw my fishing rod in the ocean, I'd be happy.
There you go.
Good answer. Good answer.
All right, Ian, thank you very much for joining us tonight, being our guest this evening. You have any closing thoughts you want to leave everybody with before Andrew turns off your microphone?
Yeah. I wanna just maybe take a jab at my ex-principal, Matt White, who left. That's right. He left Apex, last year halfway through to open up a new high school in Apex, our second high school in Apex called Friendship. And I had said to him before he left, you get to design the mascot. And so I really felt it should be the Apex Zonkies. And he didn't take me up on it. So people out there, if you run into Matt White, you can ask him, why did you not pick the Zonky as your mascot?
He passed on the Friendship Zonky.
He passed on the Friendships. Could there be anything better than a Friendship Zonky?
Oh, man. Biggest mistake ever by that guy right there.
So.
Oh, that's rough. All right.
Well, all right. Well, Ian. Yep, thanks, Ian. We'll see you later.
All right. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Yep. That was awesome, the Friendship Zonky. Gosh.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so I know, as you usually do, you love talking to our guests. So what did you get excited about tonight?
Oh, man, I'm a gabber for sure. I just jotted down a couple of really good notes. I mean, the thing about, are you getting good results from your students? Or are you getting good results by your students? And I just thought that was such a big distinction between how you operate your classroom. I mean, are you getting good stuff out of them, or are they getting good stuff from themselves for themselves? And I think that kind of ties in with Ian's, big push towards what work our kids are and making creative work.
Yeah, for sure. So I was going to say my big thing that I, really took away was when he talked at the beginning about, this is the way it's always been done, and how we need to break free from that. Because for me, that is the absolute worst reason for doing things. Oh, we've always done it this way. That's a terrible reason to do things or continue to do things. So, that really kind of, made me think. And I think people need to, put some thought into why they're teaching what they are teaching and where they're going with what they do.
New team always said I did some pre-service at first. I mean, you're just 5, and what we were teaching, that's fine. When he did them, okay, the person's years and they learned it, and that person, and you're looking at 80-year-old lessons, and it's just like it's that to be a true stand, and that is ridiculous. In the world would we accept something that is, been true for years? So that was amazing. A couple things that I also I'm chewing on, and one of the SLP assessment. Are we really saying what's important? And he brought an analogy with the sit-ups. I think in art class, I know for a fact that we are, and I am, assessing things that are actually critical to my students being authentic creators, So that is really interesting. Other thing I think of that I think is a concrete way, question of how do we make authentic artwork, the power on your top and imagine the world again and just ask why. And finally by the third, fifth and students, why you're going to get some investigative meeting. It's a great take.
And for me, I rarely let my kids go through with their first idea, or maybe they come up with 2 or 3 after that and then originally come back to the first, but they really do need to put some thought into why they want to do what they do, and so if you can push kids to think a little bit more about where they're going with things and the reasons behind why they want to do, I really do think that makes for a lot better artwork.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, great episode. Thanks, Ian, for coming on. Everyone, make sure to check out the Twitter hashtag AOE Live to catch up on things that you missed out on. Also, check back to the AOE Live website. And we'll be on the chat roll for a few minutes answering any questions and getting some feedback on how we did and kind of even some feedback on future shows, things you guys would like to see.
Yeah, definitely. As we always say, once we're done, the podcast will be available on the AOE Live page, and by tomorrow it should be able to download on iTunes, podcast app, and Stitcher for Android users. Listen to it on your drive, at home in the evening, or even during your plan time, or, since it's summer, all of that free time that you have right now.
Anytime you want.
Hey, and just real quick before we sign out of here, a big thank you to Ian. We mentioned it just in passing, but these are the last 3 articles that he has for the Art of Ed. And we're definitely going to miss him, his thoughts, his writing. He was the first high school teacher that started writing for AOE, so really opened up the doors for me, and I appreciate that. And, even though Ian and I don't always see eye to eye on what we're doing, he makes me think about what I'm doing, makes me reflect on what I'm doing more than probably anybody else out there. And I very, very much appreciate that. So, Ian, thank you for everything. We're sorry to see you go, but we appreciate everything that you've contributed to AOE. We look forward to everything else that is coming from you, and we appreciate all of it. So I'm Tim Bogatz, and on behalf of Andrew McCormick, thank you for joining us tonight on AOE Live.
Yep. See you, everybody. Goodbye.